A frozen discovery October 23, 2019, a quiet industrial estate in Grays, Essex. Just after 1:30 a.m., a refrigerated truck pulls off the road and parks near a row of metal warehouses. The driver, 25-year-old Morris Robinson, steps out and opens the rear doors of the trailer. What he finds inside doesn't resemble a smuggling operation. It's a scene of mass death. Stacked inside the container are 39 bodies, men, women, teenagers, lifeless. Some are huddled together, others collapsed mid-motion. They died during transit, trapped inside a refrigerated trailer with no ventilation, no light, and no way out. Robinson immediately calls emergency services, but it's too late. Paramedics confirm what he already knows. Every single person in that truck is dead. The vehicle had arrived in the UK just after midnight, via ferry from Zeebrugge, Belgium. It was sealed and unattended during the crossing. Customs at Purfleet Port processed the container like any other unit. There were no alerts, no heat signals, no visual indicators. To the system, it was just another trailer on another route. But the people inside had been locked in for over 15 hours. Temperatures in the unit dropped as low as minus 25 degrees Celsius. Investigators later confirmed that the refrigeration was switched on during the journey. It wasn't designed for passengers. It was designed for perishable goods, and it became a steel tomb. Inside the trailer, authorities recovered shoes, clothes, mobile phones, and small bags of food. Some victims had written messages to their families during their final hours. One text, sent just before midnight, read, "I'm sorry, Mom. My journey didn't go as planned." It was the deadliest incident of its kind on British soil in modern times. But the story wasn't over. This wasn't an accident. It was the result of a human trafficking network, well-funded, well-organized, and willing to gamble with human life. Who were the victims? The names were Vietnamese, the stories heartbreakingly familiar. All 39 people who died in the trailer came from Vietnam, mostly from rural provinces like Nghệ An and Ha Tinh, regions hit hard by poverty, climate instability, and limited job opportunities. They were sons and daughters, siblings, parents, aged between 15 and 44 years old. Most had hoped to reach the United Kingdom for work. Some aimed to enter the nail salon industry, which has become a known route for undocumented labor among Vietnamese migrants. Others were promised restaurant jobs, construction work, or cash-paid labor with quick returns. The cost? Between £10,000 and £30,000 per person, amounts typically paid through loans or entire family savings. These weren't hardened migrants or criminals. Many came from poor farming families who sold land, borrowed money from loan sharks, or liquidated assets to pay smugglers. The route was pitched as safe, guaranteed, and fast. Families were told their loved ones would fly to Eastern Europe, cross borders by road, and enter the UK within days. Several victims had tried and failed before. One young man had previously been detained in France. Another had made multiple attempts across the Belgian border. But the pressure back home, the promise of a better future, the obligation to repay loans, kept them moving forward. Many of the victims kept in touch with their families right up to the end. They sent voice messages, texts. Some expressed fear when they were loaded into the container. Others said nothing, perhaps still believing they'd emerge safely on British soil. Their final moments were not seen on CCTV or recorded in official logs. They happened in darkness, in silence, behind steel doors that no one checked in time. They weren't illegal cargo. They were people, desperate for a future. And their journey ended before it ever really began. The smuggling route. The journey that ended in Essex began thousands of miles away, in small villages in Vietnam. But the core of the trafficking route spanned across Europe. From Vietnam, the migrants were flown to countries like Russia, China, or Turkey, then moved overland into Eastern Europe. Some entered Poland, others through Germany or the Czech Republic. The path depended on the price paid and the network involved. Eventually, they arrived in France or Belgium, where they were kept in safe houses, often overcrowded, sometimes for weeks, awaiting their final transport into the United Kingdom. On October 22, 2019, the 39 victims were moved to Zeebrugge, Belgium, and loaded into a refrigerated trailer bound for the UK. The container was registered under the Irish-licensed haulage firm Global Trailer Rentals Limited. The trailer was sealed and left at the port with no driver. It was scheduled to be loaded onto a cargo ferry and shipped across the English Channel to Purfleet, Essex. While the ferry crossing itself took only a few hours, the victims were already locked inside for much longer. The refrigeration unit had been switched on, plummeting internal temperatures well below freezing. At around 12:30 a.m. on October 23rd, the container arrived at Purfleet Port. It was collected by Maurice Robinson, a driver from Northern Ireland, who had been instructed to retrieve it and deliver it further inland. Surveillance footage showed him pulling into the industrial park in Grays around 1:05 a.m. Just before opening the doors, Robinson received a message on his phone. It read, "Give them air quickly, don't let them out." That message, traced back to a key member of the Trafficking Network, would later become central to the prosecution. But by then, it was too late. Robinson opened the doors, and the entire weight of what had been hidden, both physically and morally, was suddenly exposed. 15 hours in the dark. For the 39 people inside the trailer, the final leg of their journey became a slow, suffocating death. They were sealed inside around 3 p.m. on October 22nd. The container remained closed and unventilated for nearly 15 hours. From the outskirts of Brussels to the ferry terminal in Zeebrugge, across the English Channel, and finally to Grays, Essex. There were no seats, no ventilation, no way to call for help. The refrigerated unit was active, and temperatures inside dropped to minus 25 degrees Celsius. The oxygen levels plummeted. Carbon dioxide rose. It didn't take long for panic to set in. Evidence from the scene was devastating. Mobile phones recovered from the bodies contained desperate final messages. Some were audio recordings, faint voices speaking in Vietnamese, whispering prayers, final goodbyes, and apologies to loved ones. One teenager texted her family, "I can't breathe. I'm sorry, Mom and Dad." Others banged on the walls of the trailer, leaving dents in the metal. A post-mortem revealed signs of asphyxiation and overheating, compounded by a buildup of carbon dioxide due to a lack of fresh air. The victims were packed together, many collapsed on top of each other in the limited space. They died slowly over several hours. The youngest was just 15 years old. Entire families would later receive the news not from government officials, but from journalists or other migrants who survived similar journeys. Forensic reports later confirmed that many of the victims were alive for hours after the doors were sealed. Some lost consciousness only minutes before the trailer was opened in Essex. A few may have still been alive during the ferry crossing, but there was no way out, no tools, no air, just steel, silence, and the promise that never arrived. This was not the failure of a single driver. It was the culmination of an entire system, one that treated people as cargo. And when the air ran out, it had no backup plan. The Trafficking Network. This wasn't a single van or a one-time mistake. The death of 39 people inside the refrigerated trailer was the result of a highly organized human trafficking network, built to move people across borders for profit. And it had been operating long before that final journey in October 2019. At the center of the UK side of the network was Ronan Hughes, a 40-year-old haulier from Northern Ireland. He supplied the trailers, coordinated with drivers, and acted as the bridge between British logistics and smugglers based in mainland Europe. He had already been fined in Belgium for transporting illegal migrants in 2018, yet the operation continued. His primary driver was Maurice Robinson, the man who discovered the bodies. Robinson wasn't a rogue actor. He was a trusted part of the system. He admitted to receiving instructions via encrypted messaging apps and being paid bonuses for each successful drop. In this case, he was told not to open the trailer immediately, but to wait for further instruction. On the other side of the channel, the logistics were handled by Gheorghe Nica, a Romanian national with UK residency. Nica managed the handoffs in Europe, coordinating with Vietnamese smugglers who were responsible for recruiting migrants in Asia and organizing their passage through Russia and Eastern Europe. The group used safe houses in France and Belgium, where migrants waited for clearance to board trucks or trailers headed for the UK. Several victims from the Essex tragedy had been spotted by French police in the days before the final trip. In one incident, a group of migrants were removed from a lorry in France, but later resumed their journey. Payment was arranged through family contacts in Vietnam. Each person paid between 10,000 and 30,000 pounds to the smugglers, often using borrowed money or promising repayment through work once inside the UK. The final transfer, known as the delivery, was seen as routine by the gang. Just one more trip in a long chain of crossings. But this time, their system failed, and 39 people paid the price for a route built on silence, risk, and greed. Trial and sentencing. In the months following the discovery of the trailer in Essex, law enforcement across Europe launched coordinated arrests. British police worked with authorities in Belgium, Ireland, and Vietnam. Phone records, surveillance footage, GPS tracking, and ferry logs helped reconstruct the network's movements and brought those responsible into custody. Maurice Robinson, the driver who opened the trailer, was arrested on the scene and later pleaded guilty to 39 counts of manslaughter and conspiracy to assist unlawful immigration. He admitted he was aware the trailer carried migrants, though he claimed he didn't know they were dead until he opened the doors. Ronan Hughes, the Irish haulier who supplied the trailers and arranged transportation, also pleaded guilty. He had played a central role in coordinating drivers and equipment from his base in County Armagh. He admitted to sending payment and instructions using encrypted apps and to facilitating dozens of similar crossings. Gheorghe Nica, the Romanian national responsible for organizing ground movements in the UK, denied involvement, but the evidence, messages, phone calls, surveillance footage, placed him at key rendezvous points. He was found guilty by a jury. The trial, held at the Old Bailey in London, included weeks of testimony. Jurors heard how the gang treated people as units to be moved, cargo with a price tag. Prosecutors described the case as callous and inhumane, not because of one mistake, but because profit was placed above human life. In January 2021, the sentences were handed down. Ronan Hughes received 20 years in prison. Maurice Robinson was sentenced to 13 years and 4 months. Gheorghe Nica was given 27 years. Additional accomplices received between 10 and 18 years, including other drivers and fixers. None of them had direct ties to the victims. None expressed remorse in court. And yet each played a role in building the system that led 39 people to their deaths. Aftermath and legacy. The deaths of 39 Vietnamese nationals inside a refrigerated trailer shook the UK and Europe. It was a tragedy that could not be ignored. Vigils were held in Essex and in Vietnam. Photos of the victims, some just teenagers, circulated around the world. The image of the trailer, parked silently in the darkness, became a symbol of what happens when profit overrides humanity. In the wake of the incident, the British and Vietnamese governments launched joint efforts to combat human trafficking. New outreach programs were introduced in rural Vietnam to warn families about the dangers of illegal migration. UK border authorities introduced stricter checks on unaccompanied freight and improved screening for high-risk vehicle types. But despite increased awareness, the problem hasn't gone away. Human smuggling continues. The routes change, the methods evolve, and the desperation remains. Organized networks still target vulnerable populations in Southeast Asia, Eastern Europe, and Africa, promising safe passage and work in exchange for life-altering sums of money. The Essex tragedy became a case study in how modern smuggling operations operate, quietly, efficiently, and often with deadly consequences. Authorities now use the case as a reference point for training and prevention. But enforcement alone isn't enough. The root causes, poverty, lack of opportunity, and global inequality remain. For the families of the victims, the impact is permanent. Many are still paying off debts they incurred to finance the journey. Some households lost their only child, others their main provider. They didn't die in a war zone or a disaster. They died in a shipping container, believing it was their path to a better life.